Hey Vikings Nation, gather around, because today we're diving deep into one of the most emotional, powerful, and telling stories from the Minnesota Vikings defense in 2025. This is about legacy, resilience, and a secondary that blended old-school greatness with new blood in purple. What you're about to hear isn't just stats and names. It's a journey through highs, lows, questions about the future, and moments that reminded us why we love Vikings football. Stick with me because this one hits right in the heart of every true fan. And before we get rolling, let me ask you this. Are we witnessing the final chapter of a Vikings legend? Or is there still one more run left in the tank? Let's start with a familiar name that echoes through Vikings history, Harrison Smith. Year 14 in purple. Let that sink in. In a league built on change, the hitman stood firm once again as the emotional backbone of the Minnesota Vikings secondary. Training camp wasn't smooth. Smith battled illness, missed time, and had to ramp things up slowly. For a moment, some people whispered doubts. But real Vikings fans know better than to question number 22 too quickly. By week 3 against the Bengals, Harrison Smith was back on the field. And as the season wore on, something special happened. The old instincts, the timing, the violence in his play, vintage hitman was back. Fast forward to week 17, Christmas Day, under the lights against Detroit. This wasn't just another game. This was a statement. Smith absolutely took over, reminding the NFL who he is. 3 passes defensed, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, an interception, complete control. He was everywhere, erasing mistakes and creating chaos. That performance didn't just help the Vikings sweep the Lions. It earned Harrison Smith NFC Defensive Player of the Week. At age 35, 14 seasons in. Unreal. Now let's talk about one of the biggest surprises of the season, Isaiah Rodgers. When the Vikings brought him in, expectations were modest. What followed was historic. Week 3 against Cincinnati, Rodgers exploded onto the scene, forcing 3 turnovers. Not only that, he returned 2 of them for touchdowns, flipping the game on its head. He became the first player in Vikings history to score multiple defensive touchdowns in a single game. Even crazier, he became the first player in NFL history to record a pick-six, a fumble return touchdown, and force 2 fumbles in one game. That's not just good, that's legendary. PFF didn't hesitate. Rodgers earned a jaw-dropping 99.9 game grade, the highest they've ever given since they started grading in 2006. That performance alone justified the signing. But Rodgers didn't stop there. He consistently showed up in run defense, ranking 9th among all NFL players with 440 run defense snaps. For a team that prides itself on toughness, Rodgers fit the Vikings' identity perfectly. Another familiar face quietly made his mark again. Fabian Moreau. His path back to Minnesota wasn't simple, but it mattered. After spending time with the Vikings in 2024, he signed with the 49ers, got released at final cuts, and immediately rejoined Minnesota's practice squad. That's resilience. Appearing in 10 games, Moreau delivered steady, reliable play down the stretch. PFF rewarded him with a 71.4 overall defensive grade, highlighting his consistency when the Vikings needed stability most. Now let's shift to Byron Murphy Jr., a player whose season was defined by endurance and responsibility. Coming off a 6-interception campaign in 2024, the picks didn't come early this time. Murphy went through a long takeaway drought, but he never left the field. He played an incredible 1,046 defensive snaps, nearly 100 more than any other Vikings defender. And when the moment finally arrived, he delivered. Interceptions in weeks 16 and 17 against the Giants and Lions proved his patience and persistence paid off. Those numbers matter. Of Murphy's snaps, 498 came in run defense, the most by any cornerback in the entire NFL last season. That's not flashy. That's dirty work. And it shows how much the Minnesota Vikings trusted him in every situation. Durability like that is rare, and it's something this defense leaned on heavily. Joshua Metellus brought something different, leadership. Every week, pre-game speeches, energy, fire, connection. Until the shoulder injury that sent him to injured reserve after the Dallas win, Metellus was a heartbeat guy. someone teammates rallied around. He finished the season with 2 interceptions, half a sack, and 6 passes defensed. A career high, proving his growth in this Vikings defense. Theo Jackson's story is about patience. Drafted in the 6th round back in 2022, he waited, learned, contributed on special teams. In 2025, opportunity finally came after Cameron Bynum left in free agency. Jackson stepped in and didn't waste it. He recorded the first 2 sacks of his career in the final 2 games of the season, showing real finishing ability as a blitzer when it mattered most. Jay Ward also answered the call when depth became an issue. His snap count jumped from just 35 and 28 in previous seasons to 248 in 2025. 5 starts. Solid coverage. Only 4 completions allowed on 7 targets. That's efficiency. On top of that, Ward contributed across 4 special teams units, proving his value extended beyond the defensive snaps. The Vikings also brought in Thomas during the offseason, and while his defensive role was limited, his special teams impact wasn't. He played on 5 different phases, reinforcing how important depth and versatility are over a long NFL season. Every role matters, and Minnesota clearly understood that in 2025. Let's pause on some notable numbers, because Vikings history was quietly being written. Harrison Smith finished the season with 2 interceptions, bringing his career total to 39. That ranks 4th in franchise history. Only legends like Paul Krause, Bobby Bryant, and Ed Sherrickman sit above him. Let that legacy breathe for a second. Another unforgettable moment came in Week 18. The Vikings literally used a charged timeout to honor Harrison Smith. Think about that. An NFL official announcing a timeout used purely to honor a player mid-game. That doesn't happen. Even though Minnesota was already eliminated from playoff contention, that moment made the game unforgettable at US Bank Stadium. Former teammates showed up wearing number 22 jerseys. Anthony Barr, Xavier Rhodes, Anthony Harris, Andrew Sendejo, Jamarcus Sanford, Mistral Raymond. That wasn't coincidence. That was brotherhood. Smith wasn't just playing football that day. He was being celebrated for a career that shaped an era of Minnesota Vikings defense. Week 17 against the Lions marked the highest high of the season. Early sack on Jared Goff. Immediate tone set. From that moment on, Detroit was rattled. Smith blew up plays, shut down Amon-Ra St. Brown, and intercepted Goff in the 3rd quarter. The defense fed off that energy, and the Vikings dominated. That's what leadership looks like on the field. But every season has its low point. Week 8 at SoFi Stadium against the Chargers was painful. Justin Herbert tore through the Vikings defense, scoring 37 points. Coverage grades were brutal across the secondary. Herbert finished with a 122.8 passer rating, and the Vikings simply couldn't slow the Chargers down that day. So now comes the big question. Have we seen Harrison Smith's final game? He's pondered retirement before. After 2023. After 2024. And yet, he always came back. Justin Jefferson doesn't think this is the end. He believes Smith still has more left in the tank. And honestly, after what we saw in 2025, it's hard to argue. Another massive question looms over the Minnesota Vikings. What does cornerback depth look like in 2026? Murphy is under contract. Rodgers likely returns for year 2 of his deal. But uncertainty remains. Jeff Okudah and Fabian Moreau are both set for free agency. Do the Vikings bring them back, or do they look elsewhere? The draft also hangs over this conversation. Minnesota hasn't hit big at cornerback in recent years. The loss of Kyrie Jackson was tragic and heartbreaking. A reminder that football is bigger than the game. Will the Vikings go back to the draft in 2026 to rebuild that position group? So Vikings fans, what do you think? Is Harrison Smith coming back for one more run? Should Minnesota re-sign Okudah or Moreau? Or is it time to invest heavily in the draft? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear every take. And if you love Minnesota Vikings news, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with every Vikings fan you know. Skol forever. Purple Heart American football.